Okay, so I don't have a lot of music for this one. I don't think we need music. It's just going to be a pretty straightforward stream with some storytelling. So this time I'm a little bit more organized, and I'm going to lead into everything with this image here. So this is a place I just got back from. I recently moved to Austin, Texas, and an old friend of mine lives here, and we've been friends since middle school. He's also in the design-oriented Discord. You can join our Discord. It's open to anyone. And, you know, we used to play games together from way back when, and we used to play, like, tabletop games and board games and video games and like, you know, real-life in-person style games. I'm not even sure what to call those, but semi-sports, things like Foursquare and all that. And so we've been gaming for a long time, and he told me about this place, so this is where we went. Where is it? This is a picture of the place. It's called the Emerald Tavern. And let me show you an inside shot. It's a little, this picture's a little orange, but this is what it looks like inside. It's got, you know, board game stuff all over the walls. It's got these food up here with cool coffee and sandwiches. I had this really good jalapeno cornbread salami with banana peppers and spicy mustard panini. And that was really good. And it goes, there's tables in the back here where you can play board games, and this is kind of like the front of the store. I like taking pictures, and this is Chris, you know, ordering food and running.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So Chris brought some of his board games. He has a lot of board games, and this is the one we were playing right here. It's called, what is it? The Legend of the Five Rings, right? It's a kind of a tradable card game. You build deck a la Magic the Gathering or Pokemon, and you try to battle people and defeat them and win, and there's all these rules and conditions. I'll get into that in a little bit, but essentially right here, you know, that's what the back of one of the cards looks like. And I don't have left and right controls for this, but this is what the game looks like when you lay everything out on the table. This thing needs to stop moving. Motion off, please. So yeah, there's stuff in the middle here. I'll circle it if that helps. Stuff in the middle. These are like crazy elemental war declaring tokens. These things are called fate points. These are honorable and dishonorable thingies. These are what are they called? Bidding wager points. This is your attacking deck. This is your like defensive character deck, and these are your provinces, these white cards. This is the fates that you have to spend, like your money. These are your honor points. These are some extra rules, and these are these like if you win the whole battle for a round, you get these favorable power-up cards, and there's a lot of stuff going on. You know, you have 4 slots per player, and you push up characters, and then you can stack them up with cards and upgrade them. And you know, anytime you're playing a card game, it gets kind of complex at the beginning. But now that I said that, let me properly introduce myself. So yeah, my name is Richard Terrell. I go by Kirby Kid, and this is Design Oriented. We're a group that does experimental websites. We have a blog, Discord. We do obviously streams and videos. You can find our videos on the YouTube channel by the same name. Our Twitter is @DesignOriented. The Discord link is in the Twitter. And the fun fact for this stream is that my friends and I made a tradable card game style game way back in high school. So that's back in 2003. And all of these facts are going to come together nicely for today's stream. In today's stream, we're going to talk about card game complexity. And like it says here at the top, whenever you learn a new board game or new card game, the beginning is always a really dizzying experience where people are usually one person knows the rules, and they are trying to set things up and explain things to you so you can get caught up and at least have a little bit of fun by the time the first game ends. But in a lot of cases, board games, there's a lot of work that you have to do as a player to just, you know, own the board game, bring it, set it up, make sure all the stuff is in the right place, know the rules, communicate the rules to everybody else, and help everyone have a decent time trying to get a feel for what the game's like. Video games are not like this. I'm a video game. Video games usually have a lot of tutorials and easy levels that players can just kind of jump in and ease their way into the complexity of the game, but board games are not like that. So that's why it's always kind of a unique and fun experience jumping into board games headlong. So the game is The Legend of the Five Rings, and it is a competitive card game. And a lot of times these board games and card games go for strategy. I think a lot of times people don't want to waste their time unless there's some kind of strategy involved, because I don't know. I mean, with video games, you get a lot of casual genres where people like to enjoy stories. They like to kind of walk around and be in a place, or they like to just do really simple activities over and over and gain some kind of long-term benefit. You really don't see much or any of that in board games and card games. They're all about strategy. So, I like strategy too. It's where the specific intelligences and personalities and quirks of other human beings are most clearly displayed, is when they have some kind of structure that they're trying to sort of internalize, embrace, and express themselves through. So this is a good thing. But one thing we got to keep in mind is that strategy is very hard. So when we're talking about strategy games, we're always usually talking about having sufficient complexity in order to create the depth that we're looking for. So there are a lot of competitive games in real life, from sports to action-based video games, that have a ton of strategy, highly competitive. We have fighters and shooters and basketball and soccer and all these things that are filled with strategy. But a lot of times, it's a lot easier for these games to feature strategy because it's real time. And let me see if I can pull up an interesting image without blowing everything up that I worked for. So yeah, real-time games have the luxury of appealing to the entire Descartes skill spectrum. So that's dexterity, adaptation, knowledge, reflex, and timing. And by doing so, they can spread across the burden of challenging the player across all these different axes. I'll pop it up in here. Dexterity. Things are speed, control, harmony, efficiency, stamina, power. That's basically physical movement-based activity. Knowledge is a big deal because no matter what game you play, especially strategy games, you're going to be stressing knowledge. Strategy games tend to exclusively stress knowledge, but long-term memory, working memory, muscle memory, or linear memory here, your ability to code and decode information, the ability to analyze it, and the ability to process multiple things at once. You got your reflexes here, which do not apply to card games most of the time, do not apply to a lot of strategy games that are turn-based especially, but you have things like your base reflex, how much your reflexes change based on looking for unique stimuli and unique responses. Things like your ability to perceive the world, things like peripheral vision and dynamic visual acuity and other things like that. And then you have your sense of timing. Again, doesn't really apply to strategy games. So for strategy games, just as purple right here is pretty much, they have to get all the complexity and all the fun to happen with just understanding things about memory and about processing and analyzing information. So that's why strategy games kind of have it hard. So it's a lot easier to pressure someone in real time. It's a lot harder to pressure them when they have as much time as they want to think about just about any of their moves or any of the possibilities. So then some of the major and first concerns we're thinking about when evaluating these strategy games is, how much do I need to learn? How much do I need to memorize? What is sufficient complexity before, players can have unique play styles and find unique and sort of clever and unconventional ways of getting in and out of traps and pressure and all these different kind of diversity and varied situations that reflect all the different ways that people are different and all the different ways they learn and like to play, like being aggressive, being a turtle, all this stuff. Like, it's about balancing all those things. So now we need to consider how many rules is sufficient and what kind of rules are we talking about to make that happen. So we're going to be talking about that and looking at that in just a second. But my go-to example for strategy games has always been Pokemon. And Pokemon, I've written about it on my blog a ton. Where can I find that article? I just grabbed this, pull it over here. Do this. Critical Gaming Pokemon Black. So I did a kind of a long article series on Pokemon Black when it came out. So it feels like such a long time ago. But let's see. Okay, here it is. So on my old blog, This is a Design 101 series. I'm going to make it bright. Down in the RPG category, this Pokemon's actually like an RPG and a strategy game hybrid. And the strategy part is really what the post game is after you kind of have done all the stuff, beating all the gym leaders and blah, 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 who cares? You get this super deep, super long lasting strategy game that you can dive into, and there's a whole bunch to explore there, including different tiers and different styles of play, different styles of battle. But this is my 8-part Pokemon review in which I kind of go over everything that Pokemon is in like so many words, right? And there's a certain point in the middle of the review stage where I talk about the complexity of the Pokemon battle system itself and why it's so good, and how much complexity was needed just to make Pokemon, do its thing. And no other game does it like Pokemon. No other strategy game, RPG or whatever, turn-based or otherwise, does it with the double blind, simultaneous turns. Nobody has a weakness resistance system that's more complex, tested, and robust as Pokemon. So Pokemon is always my go-to example, and having a lot of experience with Pokemon since Pokemon Red, like day one Pokemon Red, and playing just about every game in the series since, I have a really good idea of how much complexity is needed to make Pokemon what it is today. It hasn't always been like this. There hasn't always been this many types. There hasn't always been Pokemon abilities and items and all these other nuances that make the game really great. So, all those things were important, and the Pokemon company does a pretty good job of keeping things interesting over the years. So everything that we're talking about moving on now is going to be kind of in comparison to like Pokemon. So when we're thinking about what makes strategy games deep, what makes strategy games complex, this is some high level stuff. Let me I keep pulling in graphs and diagrams, right? Because I just can't stop doing this. Design oriented. If you go to designoriented.net/blog, which is this weird website here that I haven't updated in forever, you can click on this thing called the DO topic wheel, if I can scroll to it. There it is, right here in the middle, and it'll take you to this chart that I often reference. It's just sort of an experiment in displaying a lot of the vocabulary and the ways that break down video games. And one thing that's interesting to notice is everything in this blue band right here on top of it is sort of what I consider to be low-level complexity for video games. You have your moves, or what I call mechanics. There's level elements, individual pieces that can go into a level. Things like enemies, pickups, power-ups, collectibles, and then other systems and rules that make games go round. But after you have all the stuff that can go into a game, here it is. After you have all this stuff, and then it gets a lot harder. Everything beyond that ring is higher in complexity. Like modes and features are taking all these things and packaging them up in specific ways to create unique gameplay experiences. Level design is a higher order thing than all these lower level things. You're talking about, again, putting these pieces together to create something that's much more complex than any of these pieces are individually. Feedback is a complex thing that is reflective of level design. So you can have some of the cleanest, clearly conveyed elements in the world individually, but when you put them together, sometimes things get more cluttered and more complex. So that's why feedback is on a higher level. Things like difficulty design, things like story, and obviously things like design space. It's high level. So when we're talking about design space, topics that go in here are things like balance, interplay, variation, having an uneven design space, touching the corners of a design space, well-rounded design spaces, continuous design spaces, different classes of elements, depth, risk-reward, issues like king-making, interplay loops. All those are high-level considerations for what's happening in your game. And, it's hard enough to find people that have enough organization and structure to articulate these low-level elements, but the higher and higher up you go in this hierarchy, the harder it is to talk about games and game design. So we're going to attempt to do that, or at least explain why it's so hard with card games right now. So let's just click back over to this. Or this. Okay, so design space. So after only playing this game once, as I was showing you before, there's a lot going on in this game. And I was really curious to know how all these pieces come together, right? So when my friend Chris was explaining the rules, let's just take a listen and look at it. Hopefully you can hear this. This is Chris in the middle of the game helping me,
Same province that
or explaining a few things and helping me understand some stuff.
Against this one.
Can you guys should be able to hear that.
Attacking player chooses a character in play and honors or dishonors that character.
Yeah.
If you win, you're attacking this province.
Yeah.
And I have nothing to defend with, so I really don't have a lot of choices.
Yeah. So you could theoretically play something from your hand if you can.
Yeah, I don't have enough faith for that.
Okay. So are you doing any first actions though? Because you still have the first action window.
And you're attacking with
Just with the Matsubizu.
and
Right
it's a
now
3?
he can't break that province.
Because it's a 4?
He would need 4. However, this would give me 4 because it would give him +1.
So then if I swapped it with a battlefield, that's a +2.
It would give him 6. It would be 6, and then I would need 6 in order to break that province. But if I broke it, it would destroy the Borderlands fortifications.
Let's see if you can destroy it. So I swap out the black cards?
Yeah. You just swap it with the other one. All right. I will play this card. It's an attachment. So now he's at 6.
Ooh.
Also, it's a pretty cool reaction after a character triggers an ability. Oh yeah, you can read it.
So yeah,
Basically, if you use one of your character abilities, it bows that during that conflict. It bows that character.
Wow.
so I'm reading cards
that
and
would
looking
be
at
character abilities
tokens
and
and
use
counting numbers
Yeah,
and
yeah,
pointing
yeah.
at things and
There we
trying to
go.
do
It's
math
really
and
only for next turn will it?
listening to the rules and trying to figure out what turn it is and trying to calculate
That
how
was
many
just the second
resources
one.
my opponent
Yeah,
has.
Next turn, yeah.
And like every turn is slow because I'm just sitting here going like, what is all this
so
stuff?
I will break it now
For
unless
the
you
most part.
It's a 6 and I'm a 6, but that's not a tie.
ties go to the attacker unless it's 0.
And then considering situations like whether points tie, whether you're above or below, whether how much above and below you are because of other abilities that activate. Like each one of these cards has an ability, and all these abilities are conditional. And I'm just sitting here going like, just making an informed decision requires you to be informed in the first place. And like, I'm not even reading all the cards. And I'm still slowly trying to process everything.
Okay, and then this guy comes home back. So you have 2 rings, so now you get the Imperial Favor. So we put these guys back. We got 1 fate on those guys because they weren't taken.
And that's pretty much how the game was going along. I'll show you some more screenshots. That is set up. It's my friend Chris. This is me looking at certain rule cards and just trying to get used to all the symbols, and they're kind of crazy in themselves. Setting up the game. So as you could hear, like lots of stuff was going on in that explanation. So one of the things I was really curious about as I was learning, because I played a lot of games, and obviously what's cool is Chris and I, he's one of the friends that I made that card game with, are familiar enough with what tradable card games do, that I could just pick up this game relatively quickly, hopefully, and I'll show you this. So this is the name of the game that we made when we were in high school. It's called Project Orca, and we made it in about 2003, but this is an article I wrote about it, just reflecting on it, and this is kind of where I cut my teeth learning about card game design and game design in a lot of aspects. This article is kind of public, but you can read it anytime. This is where we drew our inspiration from. Chris was a big Star Wars card game player. My brother and I were big Pokemon players. I had played some Magic before, and we'd all seen Yu-Gi-Oh! Played on TV. And we kind of wanted to take everything that we liked from these different games and make one game out of it. So like, we took pictures of all of our friends from Orchestra. That's why it's called Project Orchestra for whatever reason. Even though being in the orchestra has nothing to do with whales, we did it anyway because it doesn't matter. And we added a lot of elements into the game that was reflective of what life was like for us back in the day. So we took pictures of our high school. This is the second floor, me shooting a picture of everyone down in the high school. And I was using this little rinky-dink USB camera because back then, we didn't have camera phones. We hardly had digital cameras, period. All of our camcorders were recording on mini DV, tiny little VHS tapes. So like everything is much lower resolution than would be acceptable nowadays, but we did our best, and at least the pictures are in color. So this is the main hallway, and that's why it's called main hallway. And we created this system where there's different types. Like the good students we put in this A plus studious group. Normies get this normal brown color. The people that were dead to us get this X, so to speak. The people that were in our close hacky sacking circle got a hacky sack, and so on and so forth. Just random things we made up because we needed different classes and different types. And all the stuff in all of our insider jokes and all of our things that we like to do or talk about or play in everyday school life, we turn into some kind of card with some kind of effect, and it kind of explains the rules here. We turned our principal and other inside jokes into these neutral cards, and the whole game kind of simulates what it's like to be inside of a day in high school. So there's classes you go to in periods, and every turn or so the location changes as if you're going through a normal school day, and every location has a bonus to different people, and every location has neutral characters that walk around, and you can either get them on your side by playing to their attributes or get them off your side. Like our orchestra teacher, Mr. Lacefield here he had a lot of respect for the seniors and the juniors of our class, but freshman and sophomore in our orchestra got on his nerves. So this is clearly saying if you have characters on your side that are juniors or seniors, you get 3 points per junior and 4 points per senior, and all you need is 7 points or higher total to get this guy to work for you, right? And he has these attributes. He can remove any set item card from the game just by taking it up and saying, like, get this out of class. So it was fun being inspired by real life. So here's a diagram that I made. I'll show you. Oops. Did he just go away? Don't do that. What is it? Here we go. So here's a diagram that I made a long time ago just to try to teach myself and understand what was going on inside of this card game. And I drew out what a typical turn would be like from the top center and goes counterclockwise all the way around. I will draw on this to make it a little easier to see. So it starts up here, and let's see, it goes all the way around down over here, and every turn everybody gets 4 points to work with, and you see if the neutral character sways over to your side or if they just stay neutral. And then you go into this phase here where you can do a variety of actions depending on how many points. So if points, right, and if you have enough space, you get to add characters to your side, or you get to equip items, and I represent that by these 2 loops that can just keep going like this until you run out of points. And then you go up over here, and you can either decide to attack your opponent, kind of like Yu-Gi-Oh style, and drain their hit points, or you can decide to forfeit your attack and change what location that both of you have to play in, which obviously has different effects that could be beneficial or not beneficial to you. But in order to understand what kind of game we were building, I had to draw this diagram just to understand like what a turn was like and what was at stake and what are the clear trade-offs of doing one option versus another. I also have to write down these statements about what the goal is, and like a lot of good card games, there are multiple ways to win. The opponent can run out of cards in their deck. You can take all your opponent's life points, and because of the goal, the game cannot be readily achieved. What word is this? Reliably achieved unless you have characters to attack your opponent. Acquiring characters during the delegation phase is crucial. How to lose. And it just kind of describes some basic balancing factors for the game. Like, you only have 4 slots to work with, so it limits how many characters you can put down. If your character gets killed, you get some space to work with. If you put an item down, you lose space, like this, and different things like that. I just try to talk about some risk reward and trade-offs of various situations, and I kept describing what I thought the game worked, and I had to use a bunch of words to do it in a bunch of different categories, like general strategy and what abilities mean for the game. This is what the board looks like. Why did you keep doing that? Because it's resizing my pictures. Oops. Nope. And you go to page 36. Okay. So this is what the board looks like. Each side, there's these locations that your characters are in. There's this neutral card that kind of roams around this location. You have your discard pile, your deck. You have your 2 active characters that can attack and 2 waiting on the passive slots, and you have items that you can equip to them. It's just basic stuff like that. That's what I mean by limiting space. You only have so many slots. But what was interesting is, having made this game, I thought, like, wouldn't it be interesting if my friend Chris found a way to describe this new game in terms of all these well-established rules that we knew based on this other game that we built. And they have a lot in common, right? So, in this game, the neutral elements are more like these tokens in the middle. I wonder if I can even go back and forth with this. Here. These neutral elements, these are neutral. These are your 4 slots, right? With almost 4 equipment slots beneath them. It's not exactly the same, but it works very similarly. Oh, you guys can't even see that. I was drawing on the screen and you can't even see what I'm drawing. I'll do this instead. Window capture. I can't find my window. I was gonna draw some pictures, but I think that's actually in scene 2. What is in scene 2? Right here? That's good enough. Right here, and this golden color. Okay, so these are where your neutral elements are. These are your 4 slots. These are like equipping your items in the 4 slots. This is like your neutrals that sway over to your side depending on how well you do. And, you know, these are like your points, just like in Project Orca that I was trying to explain. This is a lot like, what is this like? You have a limited amount of slots down here, but these are kind of like your ability to block other players from doing certain things. There's kind of a system like that in Project Orca, but not exactly. But essentially, this is your deck right here. This is your discard right here. And this is just a separate deck of things that only are good for playing active cards and attacking, like this. And what I didn't explain in Project Orca, let me see if I can flick back over. Right here. What I didn't explain is this location is like another mini deck that you draw from. And whenever you play this game, you have your deck of attacking dudes down here, and then you have your deck of locations. And every time the location changes, you flip over the top card and put the other one on the bottom. So having 2 decks of 2 different flavors for the game is a lot like having the 2 decks with 2 different flavors. Oops. Flavors in this game, right? 2 decks, 2 different flavors. So element per element, everything in this game is a lot similar to one that we already played, but the rules are different. And I'll zoom in on a card just to give you an idea of how complex these rules are. So let me just go back over here. So this is a deck builder for the Legend of the Five Rings. I'm just clicking on random things and right-clicking, copy image address, going back into here and pasting a few cards down. Oops, not image address, copy image. And let's get another one. This one's good. Copy image. So when we're talking about sufficient complexity, just to have this game have enough of different layers to go around and different things that you can do in different situations that come up from right here. You have how many additional points of attack power you have. You have your class here, that's a scorpion. You have your type here, that's a castle. You have your action here, which is a description of what it does. It adds 2 different types of points in this case. You have whatever this is and whatever that is plus 7. Like, I don't even know what those are, but that's just kind of an interesting example. With here, you have type, keeper, earth. You have your description here. That's pretty straightforward. Let me get a character card. Transition. Use this roll, why not? I don't even know what this is. Oh, I actually played this card. How do I? Where are the character cards? These cards look fancier than the ones I played with. Event, character. Child of the Plains. Well, the image won't stay on the screen because I've never used this system before, but as you can see, this character card has, you know, a type in the top right, a cost in the top left under that flower, a red number and a blue number just beneath the flower in the top left that represents 2 different types of attacking power, and your attacking power is also your defensive power, which is like an elegant system that a lot of card games use. It has its dynasty points, which is that 0 in the bottom right of the image, and it has a description. So like every card is pretty complex. Every card does something, and if you just kind of count system for system, you get a feel for when you play a lot of different card games that, you know, all the systems have similar kinds of complexity that layer on top of each other, and they usually stop at about the same amount because you never want to go overboard and that kind of thing. It just makes your game harder to play. But in general, whenever you're talking about your design space, you're talking about depth. It's just something that's really hard to model. Like, we just don't have standard models for this. When somebody says, like, my game's X deep, they really can't explain what they mean, and even if they can kind of explain to you a scenario, they can't really show you in any kind of clear, concise way. So I just showed you the Project Orca motto, and I explained that it'd be neat if Chris used our knowledge of Project Orca to explain the new game. But there's a lot of elements in what makes a game deep that we have no hope of talking about unless we can either get the language to talk about it or draw some really cool diagrams. So we can model things like loops, resets, you know, how rippling consequences stack up over time, what the stakes are at a given point in juncture, which is another way of saying what's the risk versus the reward. And if we go back to the game, I think it's just a decent copy image, a decent way I can explain how this game works. So let's go back to our friend here, paste a new one, and let me just draw some abstract lines on the screen. So let's see. So this game is primarily about attacking other people, and that means at the very base level you need some dudes to attack their dudes, and you compare the numbers just like in Yu-Gi-Oh! Whatever. So, like, let's just say this is your base level. Maybe I'll grab this base. We don't like black, we like a different color that actually pops out. No color pops out. What's the opposite of brown? Hot pink? Okay, so this is your base. All these guys can attack. They have two different 2 values for attacking, which gives them, like, have you ever talked about the physical special divide in Pokemon? In Pokemon Red, the original one, characters had a physical attack and then just what they call special, and that special was both their special defense and their special attack. But ever since the first generation, they decided to break that up into physical attack, physical defense, special attack, special defense. So your character has 4 distinct points of offensive and defensive abilities, with hit points being another major stat in Pokemon. That's the 5th point. And hit points are like general defense, right? So when you think about it, you're like, oh, your Pokemon can be great in offense, physical offense, and worse in everything else, or great in special offense and worse in everything else, or a little bit good in both offenses but bad in defenses, or great in one defense and bad. There's a lot of combinations, and I'm not going to work out the combinations, but it's a lot, especially when you consider that the point value for any of those stats can be basically 20 to 100 points of meaningful variation. So that's a ton of combinations. So this game has low numbers, right? Their attack values are anywhere from 0 to, let's say, I think 4 or 5 was the highest that we saw in each individual card. So that makes it the base of the gameplay there. The game would be boring. The game would be no different than War, the card game where you just flip a card and see which number is the highest, if this game only had that. So like I said before, a lot of these card games have to add a lot of complexity in order to get stuff going. So here's how we're going to model that. Let's see, I'll pick a slightly different color. When you go up to attack, you can attack something in groups, right? So like these, if you had 4 characters right here, or 3 characters right here, they could all attack basically this spot right here. The last line was terrible. Okay, so all 3 of them can attack one spot to try to destroy it. This spot has its own built-in defenses, which we can snag as this pink color again. Static number of defense, because you're attacking a province, which is a land area, and land areas don't have anyone to attack for it. It's just a piece of land. So then what your opponent does is they grab their character and figure out which ones need to defend, and they can pick any number of their guys up to, I think Chris only had 4 characters at once, but maybe you can have more. Maybe there's a limit. I don't know. So you pick how many, and that means instead of just having a one-on-one battle, you can do some risk reward, or you can hedge your bets and put more into your defense at any time, and it's a variable amount. But then this crazy green color, each card has a condition that you can activate, and the thing you attack has a condition that can activate. Basically, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh wait. Yeah, each character has a condition they can activate, and the land that you're attacking has a condition, so it's something like that. These conditions have a wide range of rules that can affect both your attacking strength. They can affect whether or not you can attack at all, right? They can affect whether or not you can attack another target, right? They could just change this purple line right here and just be like, nope, now you're attacking this thing. So like you never know exactly what you're going to expect. Because these abilities are so varied. In order to keep that nice and fair, what they did was most of the effects that trigger on these cards you can see coming. So like you can, when they're face up, you can read these. When they're face down like this card, I'm going to put like an eyeball and an X on top. You can't read that. So there are certain phases in the game where information is hidden from you, and there's certain phases of the game where information is revealed to you. And obviously when the information is hidden, you hedge and you play the odds, and when it's revealed, you can calculate. So there's a certain degree of information warfare where you can do things not to gain the maximum reward, but just to gain information. And that layers on top of just about everything that happens here. Oops, right there. So I'm going to draw a box around this. Blue equals blind and information, blind info. And purple equals target. And green equals abilities that have a wide range of effects. Pink equals base stats. Okay, so if that wasn't enough, you know, maybe the game still wouldn't be interesting enough. So what they did was they add a couple of more wrinkles, and you know, I define wrinkles as it's some kind of rule that kind of adds a significant element of consideration to the situation or the strategy. And we're gonna take a peek at this weird color. Whenever you fight, you don't just attack somebody else's land. You say, I'm going to use one of these elemental cards, and I'll show you what they do. Where is my screenshot? Shredder. Right here. So each elemental card, when you're attacking, if you win the battle, you get these bonuses. Like you get to take extra things from your opponent, or you get to draw an extra card, or you get to, you know, the attacking player may choose a target and remove some money from it, right? And that's also another layer. So let's go back. Oops. Okay, so then that adds another stake to the condition, right? Like, oh, if I don't want, I could be fine with my opponent beating down my characters or destroying my land, but what if whatever condition was added based on which token they select just pushes it that much further over the wall? You're like, well, now I don't want them to do any of that junk. So this is just one more wrinkle. This is what, like a wrinkle and a rule, or it affects the outcome. So like battle outcome. So that's happening. But then there's this crazy thing on top where every battle phase, there's 2 major battle phases, right? So this is another wrinkle on top of this. So here's wrinkle 1, here's wrinkle 2. So if you're thinking like, oh, you know, you just kind of pick cards, you play them, you look at what you got, you attack, you watch out for the abilities, and then you pick whichever extra bonus you think you're going to win, or you don't pick one that you think your opponent will want to win. So my other wrinkle is when you win, there's 2 phases to each battle. So like 2 phases. You can initiate an attack, and you know both players try to stop each other from winning. But then before the round resets, the other player can choose to attack you. And I think each player gets 2 opportunities to launch an attack. If you attack using one of your 2 major attacking stats right here, I'm going to circle it. If you attack using the red one, can I zoom in? Oops. I don't even know how to scroll on this. But for every character, there's 2 numbers here that I kind of highlighted before. Let me see if I can delete this. Oops. And you know, that's like your different values of offense. If you attack using your one of your 2 numbers on the first round, the second round you have to use the second style, no matter who you attack with. So if you have great offense in one number and weak in the other, on the first round you may be really powerful, but in the second round you leave yourself vulnerable to attack, or you can't attack very strong in that second one. So that's a wrinkle based on offensive and defensive capabilities. You may decide to lose rounds or not sacrifice that many units just because you don't want to take further losses on later rounds. So the 2 phases are uneven, and that kind of rolls over. Another interesting thing is, since there's 4 attacks that can happen in a match, whenever you win a battle after declaring it with this token, these go over to the winner's side. Here's wrinkle 3. And if this person wins 2 right here, and this person only wins 1, I'll put it right here. Oh, bad line. This person only wins 1. This player on top gets this, what they call this, a favor.
some kind of favorite icon, and it gives them basically an attacking bonus of their choice for the entire next attacking phase. So this card gets to go over there and hang out with him for a little while. And for all the tokens that aren't used in the middle, like maybe none of them are used, or maybe 4 out of the 5 are used, the extra ones get like a +1. I'm gonna slightly change the color. Favorite, and then the 4th wrinkle is a +1 of money. So now extra money value is weighted on the options you didn't use. So next time if you pick those options, you get a little bit more money to play with. And your money down here persists across rounds. So if you're stingy on one round, you get to save it for the next round. Wrinkle number 5 is you can win by doing this, which you're getting up to 25 points. You can win by destroying 3 of these areas and destroying the last sort of king area right here. And I think you can win by decking them out, right? Oh man, that's so many rules. It's crazy. But then I didn't explain one final wrinkle, which I'll do in this red color. So 6th wrinkle. Before you attack with any round, there is a betting component, which is what these are. And you pick a number between 1 and, let's say, 8 on these little dials, and then you simultaneously reveal them. And this is called the bet or wager phase. And whoever has a higher number draws, or so both players draw however many cards they bet. But the trick is, if you bet a higher number, you have to sacrifice these victory points right here, based on the difference. So player on the bottom picks 1 and player on top picks an 8. The player on top draws 8 cards, but they also sacrifice 7 of their victory points. So you're trying to hedge your bets between how many of these cards you can draw and how much you're willing to sacrifice here to potentially win on the victory conditions down here. And at various points you can risk more. And if they know you're going to risk more, then you might draw some cards yourself. Like maybe you'll pick a 3 knowing they're going to pick an 8, and then they only lose 5 of their victory points, but you get to still draw more cards without losing any of yours. So really that's just like another roll on top. And as you can see here from the diagram, this is pretty much what's going in my head. Layer upon layer, where almost any decision you make with these cards down here involves almost all these colors in the center. And then between rounds involves some of these colors on the outside, right? But I think that pretty much explains the entire game, and it kind of shows you why design spaces are really hard to articulate. Because while I can explain the rules and show you what it looks like on the table, like I said before, I didn't explain to you how the actions that the player does informs the other players, how that creates additional elements of risk, reward, or information blindness, how that creates loops. Here we go. Let's go back here. I didn't explain how that creates loops. I didn't create where the consequences reset, if at all. Like, if you just completely sort of go all in, when does that bite you? And then how devastating is it? Are there any distinct points where things reset and go back to normal? And I'll show you. There's one final rule I forgot to mention. Whenever you play a character, which we called this pink color, whenever you put any of these characters up to, for battle, you can. They cost money, which is down here in this orange color. I'll tap that. They cost money, but they naturally, like every sort of round that transpires, they also get flooded, right? So you put your warriors up, and if the round ends and they're still alive or whatever, then they go to your graveyard. They go to your discard pile. And the only way to delay that process is when you put a card up here, you can take some of your money, pay the cost to put the card up there. That's a terrible line. Pay the cost to put the card up there, but then also throw additional money, which will make this dark green color. You can put additional money down to extend their life that many more rounds. So normally everything decays with one round, but every extra dollar you put on extends their life potentially out there for that many more rounds. So if I put this card up here and it costs, X green amount, and then I put $2 more from down here, 1, 2, after costing 1, 2, 3, then this card will last a maximum of 3 rounds, which is great if it's a strong card. Then you're like, haha, he's going to stay out here even longer. But it's not great when they're like, oh yeah, well that card's dead because I played this other card. So definitely there's an opportunity to, at many phases of the game, invest more, play it safe, scout for information, or just build up your forces in a much more sort of reliable fashion. Yeah, so that's like a dizzying amount of complexity, and that's kind of what I wanted to mention for the stream. We could use a lot more effective and a lot better ways to both explain what's happening in these games, and maybe this game doesn't need nearly this many complexity. It's kind of hard to say, but we do know that if it didn't have some of these core elements, like some of the core things I started explaining first, that the game would probably fall flat. And the whole idea of the strategy game is to give people enough variety of moves and enough control when they're playing, to have a wide range of strategies that reflect a wide range of player types and preferences and styles and intelligences. And that's not easy to do. Did anything else I need to show? Yeah, that's about it. Let's just leave this picture up. So yeah, that's primarily what I want to explain. The experience was a lot of fun. This place is really cool. One of the hard parts about card games too is finding people to play and they'll sit down and can actually absorb the game this quickly, right? Because I absorbed it enough to explain it to all of you guys, and I'm surprised I kind of remembered just about every detail that was said. There's a whole other phase of playing well, which involves knowing what every card does, knowing the limitations of cards. Like there's some cards you can only have 1 in the deck. There's some cards where you can only have a maximum of 3, I think he said, in one of your decks. There's certain situations where you're limited to having cards of a certain class, whether that's Crane or Scorpion or whatever, and you can only mix in one other class into that deck. So like even knowing what the classes do, knowing what they are, knowing what combinations could be possible, knowing what combinations are powerful, knowing what your player might play, knowing which cards tend to go together, like that's all for the players to continue to learn and learn and learn as they continue to dive into the game and push it. But as far as just learning it, the experience was a lot of fun. And like most competitive games, keeping the community alive and finding joy and digging deeper is a whole nother issue. But that's it for today's episode. Dio Live. I had some other things planned, but it's a long weekend, nice 3-day weekend, so you're definitely going to get some of those other streams. I'm going to do a story-based stream, I think, tomorrow, and I'm going to do a action game platformer stream maybe on Monday. So look forward to that. I'll see you guys next time. Like us on YouTube if you like it. Follow us on Twitter, or just jump into our DO group, our Discord, and talk to us on a daily basis. We talk about design like this all the time. And I'll see you guys next time. Later.